Let's start with a question. If human beings are already whole, at least from a spiritual point of view, and it's something that I truly believe, then why does the modern world revolve around the need to achieve? Why do so many of us feel like we're constantly behind? Why does rest feel unearned and success never quite enough? And if fulfillment isn't something that we can buy, fix, or prove, why do we keep trying anyway? So, this conversation is about that illusion, the illusion of achievement, and how it quietly shapes our identities, our energies, and really our spiritual lives. We'll explore how this pattern formed, what system it feeds, and how to begin reclaiming the sense of worth and presence and also peace that no achievement can actually replace. Welcome back. I know it's been a while. I was actually, I think it's been like 3 weeks maybe. There was a few days I was kind of under the weather, and then I went on a 7 day water fast, and that's a journey within itself. If anyone has ever done a water fast, it definitely takes a lot out of you mentally, physically, emotionally, and definitely spiritually. And so I use that time to just be still as much as possible and try not to think about food and just kind of reboot myself. Uh, and then after that was my birthday. And so we were traveling. My partner took me to Cambodia. And it's interesting because I've been to quite a few Southeast countries, but I never made it to Cambodia. I don't know why. It's like right there. And it was such a beautiful visit. And it's such a beautiful country, beautiful, warm people. Food's great. Definitely sobering place if you know the history. And so I just wanted to just be present with just being there. And then coming back from traveling, you ever travel and then you have to take a vacation from traveling? Not that we're going like bouncing all over the place, but I definitely just took that week to just digress and get back to the swing of things. And I'm back here. I don't know if you could hear in the background. This is Asia. There's always somebody driving by with a blowhorn saying something, advertising something. So it is what it is. But thank you for being here tonight. And well, wherever you are, because it's actually during the day for me. But yeah, so I took some time to just recalibrate and just chill. Um, but I'm glad to be back to be hanging out with y'all. If this is your first time, welcome. My name is Francis. I'm a clinical therapist and a life coach. And on this channel, we really focus on um, resistance. And underneath resistance is either self doubt, it is self sabotage, it is fears, all the things that keep you from moving forward and creating the life that you so desire, which I believe is 100% possible once you get to the root of those fears. And this is what this channel is about, to give you the tools and resources to help you get to that part of your life where you can actually love waking up in the morning and just love waking up to the day. And it's not to say that challenges won't happen, because challenges will continuously happen, because that is how we evolve. But we meet them with a different approach, a different energy, and a different will, knowing that we are going to get through all the challenges. So definitely leave me a comment below. Let me know where you're watching this from and if any of this resonates with you. I actually wanted to talk about achievement for a while, only because it's something that I personally have worked through myself as it relates to what I want to do in my life and the things I want to create. And achievement actually led me to burnout in 2013. And what I mean by that is like the constant need to kind of like keep up a certain specific standard. And it's usually a standard that we haven't created for ourselves, but more so along the matrix conditioning that says, hey, you need to continue to climb this ladder or you're not good enough. You need to continue to climb this ladder or, you're not respected, or you can't be part of certain circles because you're not constantly achieving. And although I never wanted to be part of any specific circle or specific status, but I felt this and it wasn't inherent, but it was definitely conditioning. I felt this need to achieve. And I don't know what I was achieving for at some point, right? Before it was like, okay, I'm going to go to college, get my master's degree, do all these things. And then after I did those things, I was like, oh, what else is there? I kept looking for something else. And even through the shifts of my life, I felt like even when I went through my own spiritual awakening, that undercurrent of achievement was still there. And it got me caught in a loop. And so even when I started to work for myself and I was traveling and I was location independent, I still felt the need to achieve. And I felt like I wasn't good enough unless I was doing something big or something that was extraordinary. And I kind of got tired of it. I got tired of it because I was like, inherently, this doesn't feel right for me. And I think the reason why I got caught up so much in the loop was because it it was causing like an adverse reaction. And what I mean by that was like anytime that I kind of went and I just kind of like go, I'd stop and be like, I burn myself out and I'm like done. I would retreat and I was kind of caught in this loop. And so I think it was earlier this year, maybe last year, where I decided to sort of like streamline things in my life and focus on one thing because I felt like if I wasn't working on something, then I wasn't doing enough. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to enjoy my life with a bit more spaciousness and I'm going to let go of a lot of things. And when I began to do that, I started to see my capacity levels. At first, it wasn't about achievement, it was just about capacity. I was like, I'm doing too much and it just wasn't making sense. And nothing was flourishing the way that I thought it was supposed to flourish. So I was like, you know, I'm going to take a break from all this stuff. I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm just going to focus on this one thing that I really want to focus on. And that's it. And then a few months into that, I was listening to a coach who was also going through this, very successful coach. And I've mentioned her in the past. Her name's Christine Hassler. And she was like, you know, I don't want to do this achievement thing anymore. And became a mom and she was an overachiever for her entire life. And so she was tired of that sort of rat race of achieving. And and so she kind of was pulling herself out of that loop. And I was talking to another friend of mine, and we are both kind of like laughing about it. Like we just want to like hang out with our cats and just like, I don't have any cats, but I love cats. Like just kind of like flow without the need to be something, be somewhere, doing something. And I think that sort of seeped into my subconscious. And so I feel like I'm driven less by achieving because achievement is really just for this physical place, this realm, right? This earthly realm. Because at the end of the day, you can't take any of that stuff in the next transition of life, right? Death, right? You can't take any of that stuff with you. And I was thinking about my father who had a heart attack and he was working two full-time jobs and he was grinding and he was, hoarding all this money and all this things. And I was just like, for what? Right. And I felt like, okay, I've been conditioned to believe that I need to achieve. And when I'm not achieving, then I'm questioning my worth. And I just wasn't buying that anymore. And it just didn't feel good. And I've been having these conversations with my clients as well, because I was like, if you are constantly trying to achieve, then the goalpost will constantly be moving. And you're always going to be on the go. You're always going to be chasing the next thrill. I didn't want to spend my energy doing that, right? And I see other people doing that. And I would find myself even in the past comparing myself to other people. And I'm like, why does any of this even matter? Like, why do I even care to achieve? Achieve what? So what? Like, what happens after the achievement, And I just got tired of it. And I was like, okay, let me have this conversation with y'all. And I did a little bit of research to kind of look at different perspectives, not just from a psychological perspective, but from a spiritual perspective. And hopefully, what you get by this is the understanding that you don't need to achieve anything. Okay. And it doesn't mean, because one of the things that I struggled with was, okay, if I'm not achieving something, then I'm not doing anything. Um, I'm not creating. or setting goals. And like, does this mean I'm lazy? Does this mean that like I'm just gonna be a bum on the couch, not doing something? And I realized that's not what it meant at all. Okay. It doesn't mean just because I'm not achieving or striving for a thing outside of myself through these external forces, it doesn't mean that I am of less value or the things in my life are of less value. And it took me a little while to reconcile with that for somebody who grew up in that condition, especially from an immigrant household where that was drilled in your head, where if you didn't accomplish these things, then what do you have to show for it, right? And I wrestled with this for quite some time, and I feel like I'm in a much better place right now with this idea that I don't need to achieve anything. I just need to be my whole self and be okay with that while still doing the things that I enjoy, while still serving, while still creating, while still talking to y'all. And I feel like I'm in a much better place as a result of that. And so I wanted to have this discussion from the things that I sort of have been thinking about, talking with others. And I feel like also my partner was a huge support in this because the day that I met her, she'd always just, she's very free flowing. And I remember I used to, every morning, I'd be like, come on, we gotta get up, we gotta do our routines. And she'd just be chilling. And I had a hard time understanding, like, how could you just be chilling? We have things to do for what, for whom, when. And this was all ingrained to me as well when I worked in real estate. In real estate, you had to have certain routines and you had to have certain systems in place or you weren't going to make it. And I had to really unlearn a lot of these things. And I hope this conversation that we're going to have is helpful to you and allows you to think about achievement, your relationship with it in a very different way that allows you to be even more authentic to yourself. And I realized I didn't bring anything to drink. So I might pause for a second, grab some something to drink, wet the palate. But let's move. Let's continue to flow. And if there's any questions, um, leave them in the comments, right? All right. So before we can see through the illusion that I'm talking about, we need to understand how it all started. Before capitalism, before industrialization, there was no cultural obsession with achievement. Life was cyclical, not linear. People lived by the rhythm of the seasons, whether it was waking up to the sun or going to sleep with the sun descending and the moon rising. They lived through rituals and community. And so identity was relational, not performative. It was never about what you can do for me and what I can do for you in that sense. It was never competitive. A lot going on out there. It was never competitive. It was the idea like, hey, I had a skill, you had a skill, let's fill those gaps. And that was our mode of survival. Like we were so interdependent with each other, it allowed us to survive and thrive. And so we've moved far away from that. And I wanted to start to think about like what happened. And so back then you were known for who you were, not for your productivity. And so purpose came from presence, from contribution, like I mentioned, from connection with the natural order of things. No one asked, what do you do? I used to get that a lot when I lived in the DMV area, which is like Maryland, DC area. What do you do for work? Oh, okay. Now I can categorize you and judge you and do all those things. Oh, what's your 5 year plan? Oh, if you don't have one, then you aimless. I don't have a 5 year plan. I have some ideas, but I don't have anything that's solid and just kind of blowing in the wind. I kind of like it that way for now. Well, the other question, what they were saying underneath is, how will you prove your worth? Worthy of my time, worthy of my connections. How are you going to prove your worth to me? It's wild because we moved from this collective approach to this individualistic approach, right? And so before the modern era, the soul's value was already assumed, kind of like what I mentioned earlier. And I always tell my clients this, and they have a hard time believing it. It takes them some time, but like you are already whole. There is nothing that you need. You already have everything. You just have to um, heal the things that create that separation, that lie. And so after that, then came the Industrial Revolution, right? And that's when everything started to change. When people were pulled from land based rhythms into factories, hierarchies, and markets, a new kind of identity started to emerge, right? It went from not I am, but I produce. Not I belong here, but I earn. Not I express, but I prove. And so achievement replaced presence. It replaced being in the moment, right? It went from people who wanted to leave the world in a much better place to leaving legacies. And there's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. And I'm going to explain it further the more you watch. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's understanding what is driving you, right? And so, again, that shift was never random. I believe it was definitely engineered. Shout outs to all my conspiracy theorists out there. But you start to ask questions and you start to wonder, like, why do I believe the things that I do? Like, where does it come from? And I start to think, like, a person who knows their inherent worth doesn't overwork. Like, my father worked himself so much. I used to work myself so much because I had to prove that I had a right to be wherever I was. I had to prove that I was capable and competent in the eyes of whoever was staring back at me. And I didn't know why I was doing all that then, right? And, a person who feels spiritually connected is really hard to manipulate. You can't, they don't sell out, right? If they're really truly connected to divine light, it's hard to sway somebody like that. And also, a regulated, sovereign human can't easily be controlled by fear, money, or status. And I started to just you know, think about, like, what did all this mean to me? Because I've seen people rise and fall, and not like in a negative way, but in a way that life has a way of humbling us, right? So that we can learn the bigger lesson that's for us to learn. And I've seen money go by fast. I've seen money accumulate fast. And all of that for me in any event, like, doesn't, it's just not worth the spiritual cost or the energetic cost, right? I just never wanted to burn myself out in that capacity. And I don't say that to toot my own horn or any of that. I think we all need to find our own way and figure out what all of this means to us on a personal level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level. And so people who fall into these categories, they kind of just they flow differently. They aren't necessarily connected to what makes this world go round, which is the dollar sign, right? And I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with, enjoying your money and having fun with your money, but there's no need to be a slave to it, because when you become a slave to it, that's when you find yourself looping into this achievement trap, because there's always going to be something quote unquote better, right? And so I believe that achievement culture keeps people in motion, always pursuing. You're just never at peace, right? And I believe it harvests energy, physical, emotional, and spiritual, to feed systems that depend on our striving. If you're not constantly striving, that means that you're not going to make the money to buy the Christmas gifts to feed into the cog, right? And so when I say harvest energy, there's always an exchange that happens when you go to work. You're exchanging your energy, your time. And there's nothing wrong with anyone who does a, good, honest living. Nothing wrong with that at all. But there is an energy exchange. And you want to ensure, like, that energy feels good to you, right? And so today I feel like achievement has become the main way we define value. It's how we prove our worth. It's how we measure progress. It's how we decide who matters, right? And so we've been conditioned to believe that success equals progress and progress equals worth. And we're rewarded for motion and questioned for stillness. You can't rest. But there's a cost to all this. You start becoming what you do instead of who you are. Fulfillment always sits one milestone away, what I mentioned earlier. The goalpost is always moving. And so there's this quiet inner voice that says, when I achieve this, then I will feel safe. Finally, I'll feel safe. When I reach that, then I'll finally be free. When I get there, then I'll finally feel whole. But that finish line keeps moving because the system needs you to keep chasing it. Achievement often starts as a healthy impulse, right? The desire to grow or contribute. But for many of us, it becomes a way to manage fear or avoid pain because, if I don't get that big house, then somebody's going to judge me in a certain particular way for it, and that's going to make me feel bad, right? If I don't make a lot of money, that's also going to make me feel bad. So I'm going to continue to achieve to avoid that kind of pain. And so it can sound like if I achieve enough, no one will see how insecure I feel. If I can control outcomes, I won't feel powerless. If I perform well, I'll finally be loved. So underneath these stories is a protection strategy. Achievement becomes sort of like an armor, right? And so there are different parts of us that are working. And a high achieving part steps in to say, hey, I'm going to protect the more vulnerable part of you, the one that still believes love is conditional, right? And so the more that achiever runs the show, the harder it becomes to rest, to feel, or to connect authentically. Authentically. But in the shadow of that achiever is the doer archetype, right? That part that equates worth with effort. And that was me. Like I have to be doing something. It suppresses stillness, grief, and genuine receptivity. And so we end up performing instead of just being, proving instead of expressing, hiding from the truth that we are enough long before anyone noticed. And if this is really starting to connect, I do have a free mini course, How to Finally Get Unstuck Without Becoming Someone That You're Not. It's a 4-part mini course, completely free. You can finish it in under an hour. And what I've heard from other people is that it's been really helpful for them to really see their patterns. Welcome to Vietnam. I don't know if y'all heard that. But yeah, it's been helpful for people to just recognize their patterns, the things that kind of keep them stuck in their patterns, to keep them looping, and keep them. Um, sorry, getting distracted by the screaming. But yeah, the free mini course definitely is there for you to help you see some of those patterns. And I guarantee that you will see a difference in how you view things and how you relate to yourself. So you can get it in the link below. All right. So from a spiritual perspective, the self that strives is the illusion. I know it's getting crazy. And across traditions, the Vedanta tradition, Taoism, Buddhism, all these spiritual texts, what I realize is the message is all the same. Doesn't matter where you go. The ego seeks achievement to prove its worth. However, the soul already knows it's worthy and simply just wants to express it. When we look at the Vedanta from Hinduism, uh, those scriptures say the striving self is Maya, it's the illusion. Then when we look at Taoism, it says forcing interrupts the natural flow of Tao. Hence why all the work that I do is to say that you don't have to force your way through things. You can finally, once you heal certain aspects of yourself, you can find ways to flow and to step into change without force, without burning yourself out in different ways. And from Buddhism, it's the idea that clinging to outcomes creates suffering. When we really want things to be a certain way, it's just going to create more suffering. And when we're so inflexible to see the things for what they are, that also creates more suffering. And so part of this life is flexibility, is emotional flexibility. And if we don't flow in that direction, then yes, we are going to cause ourselves more pain. And so the you who achieves is just a construct, but your essence, it's eternal, right? That soul essence is eternal. So you can succeed by even worldly measures and still feel hollow. I've seen it because success without soul disconnects you from yourself. And I remember getting this email from this other coach that I follow, and she has built a multi-million dollar business. She had burnt out, and she started to reorganize her business. And you ever notice that the people who climb the ladder really, really fast end up coming right back down, realizing that that just wasn't the way for them to go. And they realize all the things that they sacrificed to get there. And so, what if we can still get there, wherever there is, without having to do all that, without buying into all those conditions and those stories, and just create a life that allows everything to flow in a way that doesn't go against our divine order or our divine nature. And so, in some esoteric traditions like Theosophy, Hermeticism, achievement is often seen as the work of the lower will. Like if you're into chakras, your sacral chakra, below that, it's the part of the consciousness driven by ego and survival. And so I was so caught up in achieving something because I was in survival mode, right? I just from the way that I grew up and coming from a family that didn't have a lot, I feel like I needed to create as much as I can, whatever that meant, money, whatever, just to survive, to say that, hey, I know where my next meal was coming from, that kind of thing, right? And that was still dry, even though I was fine, everything was fine, I was still caught in that script. So, anyway, from this lens, many of the goals we chase are karmic strips or initiatory trials. They're lessons in disguise. And so the danger is mistaking the goal for the lesson. And so the lesson I got from that was like, oh, I'm enough. And it's something that I've definitely struggled with over the years. Like, am I worthy? Like, all the things around me, everything around me was either a validation or an invalidation. Is that a word? Or it invalidated my worth. And so I needed to create a whole story. I needed to create a whole world that allowed me to validate the worth externally. And that is a bottomless pit, I realized over time. And so for me, my lesson was to understand that I was already enough, right? And so you might find yourself building a business only to realize the real work was healing your need for control. You might chase recognition only to discover your deeper lesson was just surrender. Uh, as the Gospel of Thomas says, those who seek outside themselves are dreaming still. And so achievement functions as a collective thought form. It's a kind of psychic spell that keeps humanity doing in order to be, because the more you do, the more you feed the system, right? That's why we have all these holidays, right? I'm not raining on anybody's parades. If you love the holidays, enjoy the holidays. Christmas, every couple months is a holiday. You got to spend your dollars. You got to achieve more, make more, so that you can go spend it in the system. But you're told you're not enough yet, but you could be. And so you're sold a path to become enough. And you begin outsourcing your identity to metrics and titles. I mean, look at LinkedIn. No offense to LinkedIn. You ever notice like people are constantly announcing their titles? And I'm not judging anybody. Trust, I'm not judging anybody. But when you start to create an objective perspective and you give space to that and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Why do we feel the need to share that? And be proud. Yeah, you know, but when we share it in a way that allows us to confirm our worth, I guess at the end of the day, it's like, what is behind that? What is driving that need to do that? And so it's interesting to just consider that, right? And so again, each time you achieve something, the goalpost moves, right? You never arrive. You just keep feeding the machine. You never get there. I always tell my client that. I'm like, if it's not this thing, it's going to be something else. You're just going to keep looking for the next thing. And so this is what I mean by energetic harvesting, because now all of your energy is not turned inward, it's turned outwards, right? To create this thing, whatever that thing is, and you're constantly looking for it. It's not just of time, but it's of your life force, right? So you were conditioned to self optimize so they wouldn't have to oppress you directly. That makes sense? I don't have to tell you that you're being oppressed. Well, you can work 80 hours a week and oppress yourself, right? It's something to really tune into. Um, I want to talk about the body because even your body participates in the illusion because achievement lights up the dopamine, the brain's reward system for pursuit. It's wired for chasing, not for being content. You get an anticipation high, then a crash. Oh, it's getting there, I'm getting there. Crash. And so achievement soothes anxiety just for a moment, but it never restores regulation. And so your nervous system forgets how to feel safe without doing. And I know this for sure because when I went overseas and I was living in Thailand in 2016, I was like, yo, what is this? Everything felt so damn slow. Everything felt slow. And it drove me crazy. It really did. And I had a very frustrating first 6 months living there. I loved it. It's a beautiful experience. Hence why I keep going back to Thailand. But it really, like, my nervous system was out of whack because it just wasn't accustomed to being still and not doing something because then I was left with all the feelings behind the stillness, which I was never ready to face. But I had no choice. The universe is a way of saying, hey, we're going to do this right now. We're going to do it. And so our invitation is to step into that challenge so we can get past some of these things, right? And so, again, your nervous system forgets how to feel safe without doing. That's why I'll rest when I get there. Never works because there is no there, right? There's only a body that was never taught how to rest. And a lot of the work that I do with clients ends up being nervous system work first because a settled body can receive. Okay? If you're not settled, it's hard to receive what is trying to be shown to you, what is being shown to you. And so achievement becomes an illusion when it's driven by fear of being nothing, dependent on outside validation, used to prove value, or substituted for presence and self trust. And I always think of Ram Dass a lot because he has a whole talk about becoming so nobody. It's also part of his documentary. And he talks about how he spent his whole life trying to be somebody. And he had to be, he called it the somebody suit, I think it was. And he had to wear that suit. And when he wore it, then everyone else had to wear it because they had to be somebody too. And so everybody's in just hanging around each other, being somebody, right? Other than themselves. And like I said, it's not that the achievement itself is a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the why behind it. What is driven underneath, the feelings underneath. And so the real question isn't what you achieve, but who inside you is trying to achieve and why. The illusion isn't the doing, it's believing that doing will complete you. When achievement compensates for inner fragmentation, it becomes a trap. Spiritually, it distracts from presence. Psychologically, it protects shame. Somatically, it keeps the body in chase mode. Culturally, it rewards self-abandonment. So every time you're chasing something versus rest, you're literally abandoning yourself in the moment. Because yourself, your body, your heart wants something else. So each time you make that decision, you're leaving yourself at the door. True expression flows differently from alignment, not from urgency, from soul expression, not fear, from regulation, not survival stress, from self leadership, not borrowed blueprints. Okay. And if you're curious to understand what your patterns are, you can check the quiz. What is your resistance style below? Takes 2 minutes. Not only does it give you patterns, but it also gives you a next step, an action that you can take. So I just don't leave you with more information because I definitely have gotten a lot of information in the past, and information doesn't create transformation, right? So definitely get that below. All right, so here's a possibility worth sitting with. Maybe you were never meant to become something, only to remember who you already are. I feel like that's what I do, like most of the time with my clients, is just helping them to remember. Like they do all the work, but I just create the container to help them remember who they already are deep down, who they already know that they are, but it got suppressed by all this conditioning, all this stuff that they have to unlearn. And I know not everyone believes that we're born whole. And that's okay. You don't have to believe that. Just notice what happens when you live as if your worth might not depend on achievement. What would come up for you if you decided to, hey, let me just experiment with this, get curious? Because the soul doesn't need to prove, it just needs to remember. When spiritual teachers say you are whole, they're describing an inner law, not a moral command. Achievement, as our culture defines it, often distracts from that remembering. It becomes a spiritual bypass, a way to stay busy instead of still. But you don't need to add more. You just need to unlearn the belief that you were never not enough. So again, yeah, you just don't need to you you just need to unlearn the belief that you were ever not enough. Hope that makes sense. I need some water, so I'm running down. As an introvert, we only have a certain amount of energy, you know what I'm saying? But I'm coming towards the end. Thank you for staying with me to this video. And if something is clicking, just let me know. Um, Share a comment below, send me an email, anything. But I hope this conversation is reminding you that you are enough. All right. So, how do we break the spell of achievement? Not by rejecting ambition, but by reclaiming awareness. Because again, there's nothing wrong with wanting a certain kind of life. It's, are we doing it authentically? Are we doing it from wholeness? And are we doing it from a place of love, balance, not from fear, not from insecurities, right? So I want you to take a moment to reflect, who taught me I had to become something to be enough? What do I believe would happen if I stopped striving? And where am I proving instead of expressing? So shift the questions from what I should achieve next to what is true for me now. That's the presence I'm talking about. Okay. You go from what do I need to prove to what wants to move through me. Okay. Create for no reason, rest as an act of sovereignty, feel worthy without output. And when the system tries to pull you back, name it for what it is. That's how the spell begins to break. Because we are creators, we're here to create and express ourselves. That is one unique quality of being human. We're here to express in our fullest extent of ourselves. Achievement itself, again, achievement itself isn't the problem. It is the why behind it, right? When driven by fear, achievement enslaves. But when guided by spirit, oh man, it expresses. And so the illusion isn't in doing, it's in believing you must do something to become worthy of being. And even if you don't fully believe you were born whole, you can begin to live as if wholeness were a possibility. And that's when achievement stops being a trap and starts becoming a form of truth and motion. It's how you live authentically, right? Because you're not here to prove that you exist. You're just here to remember what already does. You already are. You're already whole. Okay. And so that is it. I hope, again, this was helpful. And And let me know what you think about this topic. Do you find yourself getting trapped in the loop? And are you willing to get off the loop, right? So you can flow in the natural order of things. All right. Thank you for watching. Again, if you liked the video, definitely like, subscribe, share this with somebody who needs to hear the same message. And I will see you on the other side of change.